Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast. And today we have the CEO of Transform Your Performance, Regina Huber, with us. And we are so excited. Her eclectic experience on 5 continents. And today she's with us from France, I think. And we're here just getting up in the morning, and she's about 3/4 of the way, halfway through her day. But we're super excited to talk today a little bit about the power of authenticity and what Regina has learned over the years. So Regina, we're so happy to have you. I'll let you give your background and kind of how'd you end up being where you are?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amos, for having me on. I'm delighted to talk about authenticity, especially as, I have, through my many moves around the world, I have really, for myself, decided to keep my authenticity while adding on adaptability and other characteristics that I have picked up in the different cultures. So it's a really dear topic to me. Thanks for choosing that.
Yes.
And so it all started in a small village in Germany. I grew up in Germany, as you probably can hear from my accent still. And I was just always very adventurous, although it didn't seem that way because I was also the shyest girl in our small village. But this curiosity and an adventurous spirit eventually pushed me out into the world. And that's why my experience, as you well said, is very eclectic. And it includes manager and leader roles at a global consulting firm on several different continents, and also being a business owner in 3 countries. That would be Argentina, Brazil, and the US. So I'm currently in France, but with 1 foot only. And, I move around quite a bit. I sometimes have nomadic phases in my life as well. So when I moved to New York City from Brazil at the time in 2012, I was thinking how to put all this eclectic experience, including my holistic studies as well, and this eclectic experience on several continents, into an offering that would be valuable and that I could support future clients with in a powerful way. And that was at the same time also aligned with my own passion. And this is how my current company, Transform Your Performance, came into being. So what I love to do is support my private coaching clients on the one hand, so they can advance their careers as leaders, and they can advance faster, and they can also be more effective leaders, of course, and thrive. I like to call them thriving leaders with thriving teams, because that's really my objective here. And so I've created several frameworks that can support us in this work, and not just actually in the professional arena, but also outside of it. And I love to see my clients thrive in all areas of their lives, because most people don't just want a title and a big paycheck, right?
Yep.
Most people, or at least the ones that I like to work with, they want fulfillment, they want greater peace, maybe less stress, and they want freedom, they want well-being, all the good stuff. And maybe I can also mention that I coach and train in 4 languages, which is also a result of this experience. I speak 5 languages, but I only work in 4. And yes, I love to also inspire audiences through speaking, whether that's on a podcast with you or in person.
That is awesome. So I'm just curious, you've been on, or have experience in leadership in at least 5 different continents. I'm sure you've been on more, or been to more countries, rather. Out of all those places that you have been, is there a culture or an area of the world that is just naturally more authentic than anywhere else, where the people just get it and they're authentic all the time? I'm just curious.
Look, cultures do their harm in this sense, if I just may say it this way, right? We are all conditioned by our cultures, by our religions, by, everything that that feeds into a culture, of course, and we cannot really escape that because we grow up with it and then we move around. And as I said earlier, I like to pick and choose what I would like to adopt from culture, while I'm also adapting to where I go or move to, and on the other hand, I'm also picky about what do I actually need to adopt at this point as an adult person. But as children, we do not have that conscious filter, so we pick up a lot of stuff that we are not even aware of. And later too, it's just like we can more intentionally do it and really be conscious about preserving our authenticity, our authentic essence. Now, to answer your question, there are certainly cultures where there are more rules or stricter rules.
Yes.
and then there are also cultures that are more mixed and therefore have many different influences, which, in my opinion, helps, as long as people don't use that to build up walls against each other, right? Because then we sometimes use those differences not as an enriching piece in our world, which it really is to me, but as a way to separate ourselves from each other. And that's not helpful, of course. So I personally have found that when I travel and work in sub-Saharan Africa, while there are also strong cultures and strong influences, people tend to be very open-minded. That's at least the experience I have made.
Okay.
And I found that very interesting. And it's also one of the reasons I love to do work there.
Interesting. It's anytime I run into anybody that's from a different area or has experiences in different areas of the world, it's always fun to kind of ask, your transition, what has that been like? Now, all of that moving around, to your point, you've picked up so many things that has shaped your outlook on management, on leadership, on being authentic. You say sometimes showing up with the power of authenticity. What do you mean by that?
Yes, there is power in authenticity. It gives us freedom to be who we are, to express who we are. And I think that is something that we oftentimes get educated out of in a way, right? So authenticity to me is how we show up. And it's about, for example, do you convey confidence and vision through your presence as a leader? For example, right? What's your attitude? Is it aligned with your words? So authenticity, to a great extent, to me, is about alignment. The alignment of our thoughts, our words, our attitude, our behavior, of course, actions, our values, our body, or what we say are our values, right? Our body language, energy, and just in general, how we show up. And I also mentioned energy very adamantly because oftentimes we forget about energy, but everything really is energy, and energy is what gets conveyed first, right? So that's also where part of the power that you asked about is, Amos, because when we are aware of what our energy is, what it transmits, and how we can actually optimize it, then that gives us an edge. That gives us an advantage, right?
Yep.
Now, that's part of the power. But of course, really, the power of authenticity is in the alignment of all of this. And it gives us the freedom to show up as who we really want to be instead of having to play a role, which is really stressful over time and which actually always has this fear that somebody might, uncover something they shouldn't, maybe, in our opinion, right? So it's also about transparency to me. It's about that inner alignment as a leader in a sense of, okay, do I live what I preach? That transparency. And that's also what, to me, makes somebody trustworthy and credible. So it gives us this. We often talk about leader presence, about executive presence. It gives us that authentic leader presence, that trustworthy presence that is necessary to build trust.
It's fascinating because just recently I guested on a podcast, and I was telling a little bit of my story and what I've said for years, and I don't use the word authentic, but when I was in my late teenage years or maybe mid-teenage years, once I finally became comfortable with who I was and just said, this is who I am and I'm going to show up this way every day, all of a sudden life got a lot easier because I wasn't trying to be something that I wasn't. And I realize now that is really being, in your words, showing up with the power of authenticity. So can you share kind of some key moments throughout your life and career that you really started to uncover this? What were those aha moments, so to speak, where you said, you know what, this really makes sense and it's starting to click and you were able to grow out of that?
Yes, I want to start with a learning moment in terms of the energy piece. I love to dance. And I noticed that, in partner dance specifically, but also in any dance really, but in partner dance, it's very obvious that we communicate a lot through energy, through intention. Also, yes, through body language, through movement, of course, but if somebody is not secure in his energy as a leader in partner dance, then it's really hard to follow them and to trust them. And that has a lot to do also with intention and how transparent they are with their intention. What do they transmit through their bodies? And we all embody things all the time because we are, this is our body, right? So we don't just put it somewhere and leave it behind. We take it with us wherever we go. So I think it's really, really important to realize that to what extent your energy is key, because also when your energy contradicts your words, usually it's your energy that wins. And I learned a lot of that through dance, not only, but also, right? Because in partner dance, you do not communicate through words. If you have to tell your dance partner what to do, then something's not working, right?
That would be, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that would be anytime I'm dancing, I need somebody to tell me what to do.
Well, yeah, but let's just assume, you are that follower in the dance, where we have usually a leader and a follower in partner dance, right? In most of those, especially in the ones that have the embrace. So then you need to be able to communicate in a different way rather than just words, right? But it's also actually true for any business interaction or any interaction really, because it only takes 0.07 seconds for us to figure out whether we can trust someone. We often hear it takes 7 seconds to make a first impression, but it's actually less than that, much less than that. And why is it less? And why is it so fast? Because it's part of our survival mechanism. And yes, we can correct it afterward, but that is really the first impression we leave. And we don't even notice it. And the other person might not consciously notice it, right? So, but it's always happening. We cannot turn it off. So it's important to remember that our energy speaks louder and faster than our words. Right. And so this is something that I learned partly through dance, partly also through my interactions, of course. For example, I observed that at networking events, there were people who just entered the room and they had everybody's attention without saying a single word. Right. There are these people who can do that naturally. And there are probably people who prepare energetically or in some other way or mentally, for those situations, or who have trained themselves. So I didn't always have that naturally, frankly. I was very shy as a girl for a long time of my life, despite traveling, despite moving to different places. I had this very shy nature. I'm not necessarily an introvert. I'm actually an ambivert, according to tests, right? But it's not about that. It's about, okay, can I own my possibility to express myself, right? And that has also to do with owning. Over the years, I have come to own my authentic uniqueness. So, I might have felt weird in the past. Now weird is no longer a weird word to me. It's actually, it can be something very positive in a sense of beneficial. Okay. And when I find the value in that, and what makes me different to other people, not just because I'm in a country where I'm the only one who looks a certain way or the only one who speaks a certain way, but also different inside, right? In who I am, in my essence, in my perspective, whatever it is, then that also has value. And I think we all need to remember this. That doesn't mean that our opinion or our perspective is the only one that has value again, right? It's everybody's perspective has value. I think that's just really important to remember.
Absolutely. And I'd like to go back to your example of the dance and needing to communicate with something other than words. And I often tell people in communication training when I do it that 90% of what somebody receives out of your message has nothing to do with the words that you're saying. So a communication, 90% of it is not the words. That's, I think, important for people to understand. But then I also tell people that, the rest of that equation is how you say it, what your body language is. And so I'm thinking about being authentic and thinking about that example. In today's world, so many times when we are communicating with people, we are doing it in some way that only has words. We're sending an email, a text, a WhatsApp, any of those. How do you stay authentic when we are decreasing the interactions that we have with people in person, or even like we are right now on Teams? We can see each other and interact, and I can see when you smile and when I smile, but how do we continue to get better at being authentic when we're not interacting with people? Just a kind of a sideline question.
Yes, of course we have, more obviously all those different aspects present when we are in person with each other, right? When we have that in-person contact. And yet, when you write an email, there's still energy in that email. There might not be visible body language, but there are other elements. The energy is still there. And yes, the energy sometimes can get a little bit more lost there because it also, when you receive it, it also depends on your energy and how you receive it. And that is also true for any interaction, not just for and also for all aspects, right? We receive words differently depending on what emotional state we are in. When there's no trust, when we're in fear mode, we will receive a message differently than when we are in trust mode. That is just a fact. That's how our brain functions. And we run into conversational blind spots when we are under the influence of that emotion, right? So that's really something we also need to remember. Plus, we don't hear every single word a person speaks. We know that too from research. And so we our brain checks in and out as we hear words, right? So yes, words are very important. Communication is very important. The verbal element still has that importance, even though the other aspects are sometimes prevalent, as you said, Amos, right?
Yes.
And there are tools, though, that we can improve our verbal communication in terms of not coming across in a way that was not intended. For example, I love to use some of the tools of conversational intelligence. That is a methodology that I studied, and it helps us navigate more successfully through team conversations, negotiations, any conversation really. But also we can use what it teaches us about language. We can use it also in written communication, right? And we can be more mindful about what words to use in which situation. For example, when do I say I versus we and the other way around? Yes, when is we really more inclusive and when is I actually the right way to say it because it's my opinion? So these are little tips sometimes that we can also use, not just in meetings, but also in written communication. Also, one thing that I have noticed, because sometimes my mind skips ahead a little bit. I have an initiator personality, so sometimes I just want to share, but I don't stop to think about or reflect on how it actually comes across once somebody reads the message. And sometimes I also then tend to share too much when the message could be actually more concise and therefore also clearer oftentimes. So I personally need to focus on clarity in my communication and also in my written communication. That's something I know. So maybe observe yourself and also observe how your message is received usually to tweak it a little bit.
With sharing too much, I believe it was John Maxwell that once said, when you're sharing a story and you're trying to get a point across, his reminder to you is just because it happened doesn't mean you need to include it in the story if it's not relevant to the point. And sometimes I got to remind myself of that as well. So through all of your experience, you have come up with some frameworks and that can help us with being authentic and showing up and being more effective leaders. Can you share a little bit about some of those frameworks?
Yes. The first framework that I created is called Powerful Leadership Transformation. This is mostly for the leaders themselves. It's really for anybody, frankly, because you can be a leader in many capacities, right? And it is then, though, also once they embody and once they own the elements of this framework, once they have gone through those exercises or the coaching that's based on or the coaching that uses it as a foundation, I should say, they can, of course, also pass it on to their teams, and they will do it intrinsically because they, show up in a different way. However, they can also, of course, I invite them to pass on what they have learned, right? Because I'm not protective of that. So it includes 4 main pillars, which are, first of all, a self-empowering mindset and heart set. Then the second is distinctive uniqueness. That includes both your, unique brilliance, authentic brilliance on the one side of the coin, and then some areas that you might want to work on. And then the third pillar is a body and energy conscious presence. And the fourth is inspired and effective action. This is one of the frameworks that is mostly so for the individual, right? I have also taught a 5-day workshop about this once to a young team in Rwanda. I taught that in, when was it now, 2019? No, January 2020, I think it was. And I was in Rwanda, and they invited me to teach this, right? The other framework I want to mention, because it's more team oriented, is the new paradigm leadership. It again includes the heart part, and it also includes communication. The 4 pieces here are also on my website. So I don't want to go into all the details; it's too much for this purpose. But there is a frameworks page on my website where you can see the 4 pieces of it as well, and the why of those 4 pieces.
And while we're there and thinking about that, what is your website where people can jump in and get in contact with you and see these frameworks? Yes,
the website has the same URL as my company name. It is called transformyourperformance.com.
That should be easy for everybody to remember, because who wouldn't want to transform their performance? And the only thing I will add, I did see when I was looking at the website, I think everybody probably will gravitate to that one. Get your dream salary is also on there, and some framework of how you can do that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Excuse me. So, your multicultural experience across all of the areas that you've been in have obviously created your unique coaching methods and your client outcomes. Can you give a few examples of some clients or teams that you've worked with and what the amazing transformation was with them?
Yes, focusing on individuals first. So I have helped people get promotions, for example, like somebody who didn't go through the first time around. We worked together, and next time she was just optimally prepared. At the same time, also, she worked on her meeting presence, which of course goes hand in hand with that, but also was a major concern of hers because she suffered something that is a little bit of a typical pattern that we hear about sometimes of being talked over in meetings. And it also has to do with our presence. It has to do also with the element of conversational intelligence and some things we can change in our language so that doesn't happen, or at least not as often as it used to, or we can deal with the situation when it does, right? So that's one example that comes to mind right away. I've helped people renegotiate salaries, and one particular client of mine got a $50,000 increase as she changed jobs. So that's not a minor raise, right?
Yeah.
So that was pretty exciting.
And
yes.
Very exciting. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about getting $50,000 extra.
Yeah, and she just said to me, well, I would have never asked for that if we hadn't worked together, and now she did. Now, there are many, many examples. One person also that I worked with in Botswana said her entire life changed. She also won a couple of prizes after, like internal company prizes after working together. And these were, there's a lot of like prizes that are not really that meaningful, but those were, and she was publicly acknowledged. So that was very nice too. There's a lot that I could mention for teams. Well, yes, I do speaking at companies, so I get nice testimonials about those usually because I like to bring some new ideas. And like, for example, not everybody talks about energy. You got to do it in a way that it makes sense to people, of course. And I very much enjoy that. Or talking about new paradigms. Also talking about heart-centered leadership. I think when we bring that into a team, so I've specifically heart-centered leadership, I've worked with a team where there was just a hugely different trust level after working together. And trust is really the glue that holds a team together, and that also creates creativity or encourages creativity, I should say, because the creativity is already there, right?
Yep.
And it brings up productivity, it brings up innovation, because when people trust the situation, they trust their manager, their leader, when they trust their team members, then they are automatically more open to share their best ideas. And so it's what comes to mind at this point. Yeah.
Awesome. So many of our listeners are just getting started as leaders. They maybe have just moved into a position of management, but they know that they want to be leaders. So they're out trying to find different avenues and different methodologies maybe that will help them. What would be your one piece of information to somebody that's just getting started in a leadership role that you think could help them as they continue to grow?
One element is to really be very observant of how you believe you come across and how you really come across. So that is definitely very important to request feedback, to practice a lot of self-leadership. Self-leadership is the basis for any sustainably effective leadership. Self-observation, self-knowledge, self-awareness. Practice this as much as possible, and you will definitely gain a lot. In my opinion, this is more important than anything else, right? One idea that I also would like to add to that is that it's time to leave some of those old leadership paradigms behind. And one of them is also the idea that we can empower other people, right? We cannot empower anyone. Everyone can only empower themselves. Now, we can share how to do this if we know. We can guide our team members on how to empower themselves and see their own power, whether that's their creative power, whether it's, for them to build greater confidence. That's way more useful than this talk about empowering our teams. It's not how it works. You can give them resources. You can give them not just material resources, but, can give them, of course, training, mentoring, coaching, but empower them, that's not possible. Help them grasp their own power, and you will be surprised by the results.
Awesome. Well, as we are coming to a close, we have a little bit of a fun section at the end. I like to kind of rapid fire ask 3 questions of every guest. And the first question, many times in leadership conversations, talking with business owners, comments come up that are something to the nature of, well, here's something that you won't learn in school, or here's something that I wish people learned in school. And I thought, what a great opportunity with all of the leadership experts that I get to interview. I'm asking the question, if you could get school administrators from across the world in front of you, what would be your piece of advice to them of something that we should be including and doing throughout our youth's education that will prepare them better for being a leader and really just prepare them better for being in the world?
Yes. I have a few ideas. I have many ideas about this. I've written about it. I have talked about it. Now, I want to mention 2 things, right, in this context here today. One is, teach students that their authentic uniqueness matters. Who they are matters. We all know that schools are made to put people into the system, right? I believe that is not really beneficial. I would really love to see a greater tendency towards respecting every student's uniqueness and encouraging them to express it and to even just figure out what it is, because sometimes we don't even know before we get a chance and before we are asked, right? Before somebody sends us on this discovery process. And then the second piece is, tell students that their dreams matter. Right? Never discourage students from daydreaming. Dreams are the fundament of visions. Now, why is it so hard for us adults, or for many of us, to write our visions? Why do not more people even do it? Because they don't know where to start, because they have unlearned to dream. And a lot of people say, oh, dreams don't come true, plans come true. But you know what? There's no plan without a dream. There has to be a dream first to get to your vision, and that's what eventually creates the plan, or helps you be in a space where you can create a plan to implement it, right? So, and then also, one thing that will improve automatically, a lot of us, we like to talk about the power of visualization, but we have been discouraged our entire lives to not do it, from doing it, I should say, discouraged from doing it. So now we got to relearn this. There's so many things that we know how to do as children and that we were educated out of. For whatever reason, I would so much love to have this back.
Awesome. I think some good advice. It's one of those things, and we continually hear your first piece about embracing the uniqueness. And so many times, I think we automatically think of crazy things that go with that. But the whole point is we're all unique, every single one of us, and it's embracing and turning your uniqueness or difference into a superpower, And so like for myself, I was one of those kids that did not learn the general way that made me unique. But once I figured out how I learned and how I could leverage that, I then also figured out that I could do really hard things because I had the ability to be able to learn quickly because I understood how I learned. But I just think, everybody's unique, and many times our minds go, when we use that language, our minds go to all these other places that sometimes is divisive. But the reality is we are all unique, and we just need to, to embrace that. So I love it. The second question is, what is your go-to book that throughout your life you've continually went back to that has been helpful and supportive of your success?
One book I really love is The Four Agreements.
Okay.
This is it just has some great wisdom, Toltec wisdom about how to live your life. And I believe every leader should have read it.
Awesome. And then the last question is, in today's world with all the moving technology and things that are out there, what's your favorite piece of technology that you find useful?
Whoa. Yes, I love music. So, of course, I would have to say something that has to do with music, although right now I'm not equipped ideally for this. So I will say the microphone.
Okay.
It gives us a voice also, in a virtual setting nowadays. I love to speak in person. I like that direct interaction in person. And at the same time, I have the opportunity to be here with you today to talk about the things we've talked about and inspire our audience. And isn't that amazing?
Yes, if you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be sitting in a room in Pennsylvania having an interview with someone in France, I would have said that's not going to happen. That people aren't going to go for that. And here we are. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with us today and give us your insights. I had a lot of fun. And I hope maybe someday we can get you back on. And I think there are so many more pieces that we could unpack there. But thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It's been a wonderful conversation as far as I'm concerned. And I do hope that our audience finds value in it too.
Awesome. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our back episodes if you haven't listened to those. And also don't forget to like us and follow us so that you get updates whenever we have new episodes coming out. Until next time, we appreciate you and thank you for listening.